Hey everyone, it's Bravo and Botox here, and I am so excited to be announcing the launch of my new Patreon. If you don't know already, Patreon is a fantastic way for content creators and podcasters like myself to connect with followers and get support and funding for their work. So for $5 a month, you'll be able to get access to 4 extra ad-free podcasts a month. These 4 episodes will be my special Patreon series called Bravo Weekly Musings, where I go over whatever Bravo-related topic is on my mind that week. This could include giving my thoughts on recent Bravo controversies, responding to controversial or interesting DMs, trying to settle heated debates and topics amongst the Bravo fandom, discussing maybe one news story in depth that everyone is talking about, and, just having the ability to speak more freely and candidly about some of the tea going on in the Bravo world, including when, certain Bravo lebs decide to DM me. I'm also going to post polls where you can vote on the topics for the upcoming episodes, and you'll be able to comment and share your thoughts on each episode. It's a great way for me to engage with all of you, with the Patreon subscribers, and, your comments won't get lost in the DMs. They will always get read, and I can always see them, and I can respond, and it's just a great way to have those, interesting, nuanced, in-depth conversations that I know the followers and listeners of my podcast and my Instagram love. Your money, that $5 a month, will do so much for me. It'll go straight into helping me improve, grow, and expand the podcast and social media. It'll help me put money into better equipment, software, and just help me to get paid as a woman who loves doing this work. And please check out my preview. It's coming up right after this little announcement for my first Bravo Weekly Musing called Why Kathryn Dennis Was Up in My DMs. I'm going to tell the full story with details and give you my thoughts about, content creators and Bravo celebrities and why they just shouldn't always mix. So head to patreon.com/Bravo and Botox to sign up now. And I can't wait to see you all there. Meanwhile, take a look at this preview from my first Bravo Weekly Musing. Hope you enjoy. Talking about Kathryn Dennis, because I think I mentioned on my Bryn episode that, that Bryn was not the first Bravo celebrity to come into my DMs hot and send me this whole thing. However, I didn't really go into detail about it, about what happened with Kathryn. So Kathryn had done that as well. And then I saw this week the story about Kathryn possibly being behind a hit and run. Sorry, I just am drinking a tea for keep my voice good. So the story is that a car that is registered to her hit I think it was was it a crossing guard? Something like that. Like a person who was, in charge of the safety in the area of her kid's school, I think. Or a school zone at least. So the person hit the guy. It was not the type of injury, like non-life-threatening injuries. However, the person did need to go to the hospital, but they're okay. And, it made it onto local news stations. So there's that. Now, the other thing is that we don't know yet if it's Kathryn or not. A lot of people, I think, wouldn't be surprised if it was Kathryn because, she's had issues. This is not her first. If it is her, this wouldn't be her first, run-in with the law. We suspect, that she has issues with addiction and substance use. So, this isn't a new thing. But anyways, so she's been on my mind a bit this week. She's also been on my mind because she's not on Southern Charm. So, and I was thinking this week about how the show differs without her on it, which I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Like, I think Kathryn has issues, real issues that she needs to deal with. I don't think that reality TV is good for her. And, I think so far this season of Southern Charm is actually pretty good. So maybe it's kind of showing, maybe we don't need Kathryn in the mix as much. I mean, she was on last season and then she just kind of like told off Naomi. I think it was Naomi. And then she just disappeared. I would have rather had Naomi. I know a lot of people were not fans of her last season, but I don't know. I just liked like having one of Craig's exes in the mix. I just feel like they all have to have an ex in the mix, and it seems kind of unfair that Craig doesn't have to have an ex in the mix. So I would have liked that. But anyways, so let's talk about Kathryn, since she's been on my mind. So as I mentioned, she was up in my DMs last season. Now, it wasn't in relation to Southern Charm. It was actually in relation to Winter House. So basically what happened is I was, watching Winter House, covering it, putting up some Twitter roundups as I do. And one of the Twitter roundups was in response to one of the first episodes or I don't even know if it was one of the first episodes, but towards the beginning of the season where Jason Cameron, who had kind of a little something with Lindsay Hubbard. So he came into the house, and kind of one of the first things he does when he comes into the house is he goes to confront Lindsay, and he confronts her about the fact that he feels she spoke to people about the miscarriage that she had and made it public without running it by him first. And he was upset about this. So, okay, but people on Twitter were confused, including myself, and rightfully confused by his reaction. First of all, because at this point it had happened, it had not just happened. So the miscarriage was not new news. So that was one thing. There had already been like a whole season of Summer House about it. It was that season where like Amanda and Paige and them kept bringing up like the, weaponizing Lindsay's miscarriage, where a lot of people were mad about that. So a whole season had already happened. It had already been in public. Now, there were other things as well, such as Lindsay said that she had run it by Jason. He said it was okay. And in addition to that, they apparently had filmed a scene for Summer House, Jason and Lindsay, talking about the miscarriage. However, Bravo chose not to use it. Okay. So Bravo chose not to use it. However, that is still Jason and her talking about it on camera, and therefore Jason consenting to the conversation in a public forum, because he didn't know when it was being filmed if it was going to get used or not. So then he kind of accused Lindsay on Winter House of like going on this press tour about the miscarriage and, blah, blah, blah. And Lindsay looked very confused. And then she did a couple podcast interviews saying she was confused and kind of saying what I'm saying, which is that he was okay with it being public because he wanted to film a scene about it on Summer House. And then, he was, maybe bothered that it wasn't used. It didn't get used, whatever. And then, so she was just put off. Like, she felt like he was using it for a moment on Winter House now. Because she was like, he could have done interviews in the press about it as well. Like, she's like, we did talk about that. And he did say he was okay with it. And on top of that, we'd already filmed it for Summer House, so it was already public news. So she was like, if I'm going to do interviews or press tours and people ask me about it, then yeah, I'm going to answer those questions. Which, to me, that makes sense. Okay. So I just thought it was a little weird. Like, it just felt like Jason was a little thirsty by bringing this up. Like, maybe it was his only storyline. He wanted to have a scene. He didn't get to have his scene on Summer House because they didn't air it. And then the whole thing of like Lindsay keeps talking about it in the media. Well, you know, I understand that technically it was his baby too, but it was her body that it happened to. So it is a little different. She went through the loss of it and it was in her body. So he didn't go through like the physical aspect of it. That doesn't mean he couldn't have been upset about it. But the other thing that people were a little like meh on Twitter too, was that people were like, he only knew about the baby for one day. And I mean, yeah, it's only one day, but it's like, you were like that devastated. I guess, I don't know. I guess he could have been. Anything could, right? So I don't know. So that part to me is not as relevant. But anyways, I'm just relaying what Twitter was saying. So there was a lot of criticism of Jason, like trying to have a moment. But then there were some people who were kind of on this, like, you know, not all men, or like men matter too. Like, and it was coming off very like, I don't know, just like misogynist in some ways, but a lot of people jumping in to be like, well, men are allowed to be upset about miscarriages too, and you know, that was a very small percentage of people, because most people were understanding that of course men can be upset about miscarriages. No one is saying they can't. I wasn't saying they can't. No one on Twitter was saying they can't. Lindsay wasn't saying they can't. She was just saying that this guy is a little thirsty for camera time. We already went through this. He's bringing it up again. And by the way, re-upsetting her just for his own, so he can be guaranteed some camera time, which it worked. Okay. And then later on, by the way, we find out he's then like dating Giselle, and that, you know, word on the street came out that he's, you know, always trying to hitch his wagon to Bravo people because he is thirsty. I always got that vibe from him, that he's just like, he's a little bit of an opportunist, which a lot of these Bravo people are. It's not the end of the world, but like, let's just call a spade a spade. So anyways, point is that I put up a couple tweets in my Twitter roundup. I think there was maybe one where it was like, just kind of questioning Jason's intentions and questioning that Jason was like, you know, kind of using this miscarriage story as an excuse so that he could get camera time. That doesn't mean that he wasn't ever upset about the miscarriage in real life when him and Lindsay originally found out about it. That doesn't mean that his feelings aren't hurt about it. I thought, you know, even the conversation that him and her had on Winter House went pretty well. You know, they kind of apologized to each other in some ways, and they both took some ownership, and it was fine, and everything was fine after that. So it really wasn't like that big of a conflict or storyline anyways, but you could tell Lindsay was annoyed. She kind of mentioned it in her confessional, but she got over it quick, which she tends to do when it comes to conflicts. You know, she gets really heated, but then she gets over it pretty fast. So that was really the story. It wasn't like that big of a storyline. So I didn't even really think that much about it when I put those tweets in. There was like maybe one or two. So then I get a DM from Miss Kathryn Dennis, who I guess was a fan of Winter House. And she sends me a novel of a DM. Like, it was like, take what Bryn sent me and multiply it by 100. It made Bryn's look like child's play. Like, it was like 4 long paragraphs that like each one took up like half my phone screen or more. This is the end of the preview. For more, please sign up at patreon.com/Bravo and Botox.